Hey, excuse me, girl, this isn't the welfare line. Flight attendant Renee Martinez towered over the elegant black woman in seat 1A, her voice cutting through the cabin like a blade. Every passenger within earshot froze. The woman looked up from her tablet, dark eyes steady. "I have a first-class ticket," Dr. Whitney Sterling replied calmly, extending her boarding pass. Renee snatched it like contraband, examined it with theatrical suspicion, then threw it back at Whitney's chest. "Don't try to scam your way up here with fake documents, honey." Other passengers turned to stare as Renee pulled out her phone, starting to livestream. "Y'all, we got another one trying to fraud the system." Whitney remained seated, adjusting her blazer calmly. "Ma'am, I suggest you verify that boarding pass properly before making accusations. Don't you dare tell me how to do my job," Renee screamed, and her hand flew across Whitney's face with brutal force. Crack! The slap echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. Whitney's head snapped to the side, but she remained seated, a red handprint blooming across her cheek. Have you ever been so underestimated that people couldn't see the power right in front of them? 10 minutes until takeoff. Whitney Sterling, 29 years old, CEO of Sterling Aviation Holdings, sat in first-class seat 1A of Premier Airways flight PA3649, bound for Atlanta. Her simple but expensive blazer concealed a $50,000 Patek Philippe watch. Her Hermes Birkin bag, worth more than most people's annual salary, sat quietly in her lap. But none of the passengers rushing past her to their seats would have guessed that this composed young black woman controlled a $3.2 billion aviation empire. 3 months ago, she had inherited Sterling Aviation Holdings from her grandfather, making her the youngest African-American woman to run a major aircraft leasing company. The inheritance hadn't been easy. Board members questioned her experience. Competitors whispered about nepotism. Financial journalists wrote articles with titles like "Too Young, Too Soon." Whitney had something to prove, and today's board meeting in Atlanta would determine whether she could secure the largest contract expansion in company history. "Security to Gate 8B, Renee announced into her headset, never breaking eye contact with Whitney. "We have a passenger refusing to move to her assigned seat." The red handprint on Whitney's cheek was still visible, but her expression remained serene. The businessman in 1C, a military veteran named David Martinez, immediately pulled out his phone and began recording. Unlike the original incident, this veteran recognized injustice when he saw it. "This is completely wrong," he said aloud, his camera capturing everything. The middle-aged woman in 2A, Sarah Thompson, a high school principal with 20 years of experience dealing with difficult situations, also began documenting. "I'm recording this for evidence," she announced. "This is assault and discrimination." In seat 3B, Marcus Johnson, a 22-year-old communications student at Morehouse College, started his own live stream. "Y'all, I'm witnessing some serious discrimination right now. This flight attendant just slapped a paying passenger." Renee's confidence wavered as she realized multiple passengers were documenting her actions, but she doubled down. "Everyone needs to mind their own business. This woman is clearly trying to scam her way into first class." Whitney reached into her blazer with deliberate precision and pulled out her phone. The screen showed 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Her assistant, her legal team, her board chair, and someone listed simply as legal emergency line had all been trying to reach her. She declined the calls without looking up and placed the phone face down on her tray table. "Ma'am, I understand you're having a difficult day, but physical assault is a federal crime on aircraft. I suggest you reconsider your approach." Heavy footsteps echoed up the jet bridge. 2 airport security officers boarded, their presence filling the narrow aisle. Officer Jackson, the lead, glanced at Whitney's reddened cheek, but addressed Renee first. "What's the situation?" "This passenger is in the wrong seat," Renee replied, her live stream still running with 89 viewers watching. "She's refusing to move to coach where she belongs, and she got aggressive when I tried to help her." Officer Jackson looked at Whitney, taking in her composed posture and expensive accessories. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Renee's agitated state. "Ma'am, can I see your boarding pass and identification?" For the first time since being slapped, Whitney smiled slightly. "Of course, officer." She handed over both documents with steady hands. The boarding pass clearly showed seat 1A first class, purchased 3 days ago for $3,247. The identification read, Dr. Whitney Sterling, with an address in Buckhead, Atlanta's most exclusive district, 8 minutes until takeoff. But what Officer Jackson and everyone else in that cabin didn't know was that Whitney Sterling wasn't just any passenger. The aircraft they were standing on, tail number N892SA, was owned and leased by Sterling Aviation Holdings. Whitney didn't just belong in first class. She owned the entire aircraft, and she was about to prove it in a way none of them would ever forget. Officer Jackson examined Whitney's documents carefully, his brow furrowing as he processed the information. The boarding pass was legitimate, purchased directly through Premier Airways' website. The Georgia driver's license showed her Buckhead address, one of the most expensive zip codes in Atlanta. These documents appear to be in order, Jackson said slowly, looking from Whitney's composed face to Renee's increasingly frantic expression. Ma'am, can you explain why you believe this passenger is in the wrong seat? Renee's livestream had climbed to 156 viewers, with comments pouring in faster than she could read them. Look, officer, I've been doing this job for 8 years. I know when someone doesn't belong in first class. She probably bought these documents online or something. The veteran in 1C, David Martinez, spoke up firmly. Officer, I witnessed this entire incident. The flight attendant physically assaulted this lady without any provocation. She slapped her across the face before even checking her documentation. Principal Sarah Thompson nodded vigorously. I saw it too. This woman was sitting quietly, minding her own business when she was attacked. I've documented everything. Marcus, the Morehouse student, held up his phone. Officer, I'm live streaming this to 73 people right now and they all saw the assault happen in real time. This is discrimination, period. Officer Jackson's expression shifted as he realized the scope of what he was dealing with. Multiple witnesses, live documentation, and clear evidence of both discrimination and assault. His 15 years of airport security experience told him this situation was about to explode. Ma'am, he said to Whitney, I apologize for the treatment you've received. This should not have happened. He turned to Renee. Ms. Martinez, I need you to end your live stream immediately and step aside. We need to discuss this situation with your supervisor. But Renee wasn't ready to back down. This is ridiculous. Everyone's being fooled by some fake documents and a good performance. I know what I saw. That's when Senior Flight Manager Robert Harrison appeared at the aircraft door. His pressed uniform and authoritative demeanor immediately commanded respect from both crew and security. At 52 years old, Harrison had worked in aviation for over 2 decades and had seen every type of passenger incident imaginable. What's the delay? Harrison asked, scanning the tense cabin scene. His eyes moved from the recording passengers to Renee's flustered state to Whitney's remarkably composed posture despite the visible handprint on her face. Passenger discrimination incident, sir, Officer Jackson replied. The flight attendant physically assaulted this passenger and made accusations about fraudulent documentation. Multiple witnesses have recorded the assault. Harrison's jaw tightened. Physical assault incidents were career-ending events that could result in federal charges and massive lawsuits. He approached Whitney with careful professionalism. Ma'am, I'm Robert Harrison, Senior Flight Manager for Premier Airways. I sincerely apologize for what appears to be a completely unacceptable incident. May I personally review your documentation? Whitney handed over her boarding pass and ID with the same calm grace she'd maintained throughout the ordeal. Harrison examined them meticulously, cross-referencing the information on his tablet. Everything checked out perfectly, but Harrison was a cautious man. In his experience, situations this volatile usually had more complexity than they initially appeared. He'd seen sophisticated scams before, though nothing quite matched Whitney's unshakable composure under pressure. Doctor Sterling, Harrison said, reading her identification aloud, your documents are clearly legitimate and I apologize for any suggestion otherwise. However, given the seriousness of the assault allegations, I need to involve our corporate security team for a full investigation. Whitney's phone buzzed with another call. This time the caller ID showed board chair emergency. She glanced at it briefly, then declined the call and placed the phone back on her tray table. Mr. Harrison, Whitney said calmly. "I appreciate your professional approach. However, I think there are some things about this situation that you should understand before we proceed further." She reached into her blazer and withdrew a slim black leather business card holder. With deliberate precision, she extracted a single card and placed it face down on her tray table, her fingers resting gently on top. "Before you make any irreversible decisions, I suggest you examine this carefully." 6 minutes until takeoff. Harrison looked at the hidden business card, then back at Whitney's steady gaze. Something in her tone, not arrogance, not desperation, but absolute certainty, gave him pause. It was the voice of someone who had never lost a negotiation in their life. The veteran in 1C zoomed his phone camera toward the business card, trying to catch a glimpse of what it might reveal. Principal Thompson leaned forward slightly, her documentary instincts sensing a crucial moment. Marcus's live-stream audience was demanding to know what was on the card. Officer Jackson maintained his professional stance, but his experience told him this situation was about to shift dramatically. Renee's livestream had reached 234 viewers, but her confident commentary had died as she watched the adults in the situation treat Whitney with increasing respect and caution. Whitney lifted her fingers from the business card and held it up where Harrison could see it clearly. What he read would change everything they thought they knew about this quietly powerful young woman. The revelation was about to shatter every assumption they'd made. The business card was elegant, understated, and devastating. Sterling Aviation Holdings, Dr. Whitney Sterling, Chief Executive Officer and Founder. Primary Contractor, Commercial Aviation Division, North America. Harrison's face drained of all color as he read the card. 22 years in aviation had taught him to recognize the names that mattered in the industry. Sterling Aviation Holdings wasn't just any company. They were one of the largest aircraft leasing operations in North America, controlling over $2 billion in aviation assets. "Ma'am," Harrison whispered, his voice barely audible, "I had no idea." "Clearly," Whitney replied with the same calm composure she'd maintained since being physically assaulted. She opened an app on her phone displaying real-time aircraft registrations. This particular aircraft, tail number N892SA, is currently under lease from Sterling Aviation Holdings. Contract value, $8 million annually. Lease term 5 years renewable. The veteran David Martinez had managed to capture the business card on his phone camera. He read it aloud for his recording. Sterling Aviation Holdings Chief Executive Officer. His voice trailed off as the implications hit him. Principal Sarah Thompson's documentation instincts went into overdrive. She'd worked in education long enough to recognize power when she saw it, and this young woman possessed a level of institutional authority that went far beyond anything she'd encountered. Marcus's live stream exploded with comments as his viewers began Googling Sterling Aviation Holdings. Within seconds, the chat was filled with information about the company's massive fleet, billion-dollar contracts, and recent leadership transition to a young African-American woman. "Wait, is this real?" One comment read, "Sterling Aviation Holdings leases planes to like half the airlines in America." Another viewer posted, "Holy shit, this flight attendant just slapped her own boss's boss." Officer Jackson stood frozen, his 15 years of security experience providing no guidance for this unprecedented situation. He'd dealt with unruly passengers, medical emergencies, and security threats, but never a situation where a passenger had been assaulted and then revealed themselves to be a major stakeholder in the aviation industry. Harrison pulled out his radio with shaking hands. "Captain Thompson, I need you in the cabin immediately. We have a situation that requires your personal attention." "Mr. Harrison," Whitney said calmly, "while we wait for Captain Thompson, perhaps you should know that this entire incident has been witnessed and documented by multiple passengers across several platforms." She gestured toward the phones recording throughout the cabin. David's military training had made him an excellent documentarian. Sarah's educational background gave her systematic recording skills, and Marcus's communications studies meant his live stream was professionally managed and rapidly gaining viewers. "Current metrics," Whitney continued, consulting her phone, "show this incident has been viewed over 400 times across platforms in the past 8 minutes. The hashtag Premier Assault is beginning to trend in Atlanta. Renee, who had been silent since Harrison's arrival, finally found her voice. "This has to be fake. Anyone can print a business card. I was just doing my job." Class Whitney turned her attention to Renee with laser-focused precision. "Ms. Martinez, doing your job doesn't include making racial assumptions, physically assaulting passengers, or broadcasting incidents without consent. Your actions violated federal anti-discrimination laws, assault statutes, and privacy regulations." Captain Thompson emerged from the cockpit, his distinguished silver hair and 3 decades of aviation experience immediately commanding respect. At 58, he'd seen every type of crisis imaginable, but the tension in the cabin was unlike anything in his career. His eyes immediately found Whitney, taking in her composed posture despite the visible handprint on her cheek. Then he saw the business card in Harrison's trembling hands. Recognition, shock, and what appeared to be genuine fear crossed his features in rapid succession. "Everyone step back from seat 1A immediately," Captain Thompson ordered with absolute authority. Officer Jackson and Harrison moved away from Whitney's row without question. "Dr. Sterling," Captain Thompson said, his voice carrying profound respect and barely controlled concern, "on behalf of Premier Airways and our entire crew, I offer our most sincere and unreserved apologies. This incident should never have occurred under any circumstances." Whitney looked up at Captain Thompson with those same steady, dark eyes that had maintained their composure throughout the entire ordeal. "Captain Thompson, I appreciate your intervention, but this situation has gone far beyond a simple misunderstanding." She gestured toward the dozens of phones documenting the scene. "As you can see, this incident has been extensively documented across multiple platforms. The assault, the discrimination, and the systematic failure of your crew to follow proper protocols have all been captured in real time. 4 minutes until takeoff." "Captain," Whitney continued, her voice carrying quiet authority, "I believe you understand the implications of what has transpired here. The question now is, what are you and your airline prepared to do about it?" Her business card still lay visible on the tray table, a small piece of cardstock that had completely shifted the power dynamics in the cabin. Captain Thompson stared at the card, calculating rapidly. If this woman truly was the CEO of Sterling Aviation Holdings, this incident could end careers, bankrupt the airline, and trigger industry-wide investigations. But Whitney wasn't finished. She reached into her handbag and withdrew a second business card, this one simpler in design but potentially more devastating in its implications. What she was about to reveal would completely shatter their understanding of just how much power sat quietly in seat 1A. The second business card bore a more understated design: Apex Capital Ventures, Managing Partner, Transportation Sector Specialist. Whitney placed it next to the first card on her tray table. "Captain Thompson, there's something else you should know. Sterling Aviation Holdings isn't my only business interest in the aviation industry." She opened a financial portfolio app on her phone, displaying hundreds of different investment holdings across multiple sectors. Apex Capital Ventures, which I founded 4 years ago, holds a 12.7% equity stake in Consolidated Airways International, Premier Airways' parent company. We're currently the 3rd largest shareholder. The revelation hit the cabin like a thunderbolt. Captain Thompson's face went from pale to ashen as he grasped the full scope of the situation. Not only had his crew physically assaulted the CEO of a major aircraft leasing company, but they'd attacked a significant owner of his own airline. David Martinez's military training kicked in as he processed the strategic implications. "Holy shit," he whispered to his camera. "She doesn't just lease planes to airlines. She literally owns part of this airline. This is corporate warfare level stuff." Principal Sarah Thompson's documentation became even more methodical as she realized she was witnessing what might become a landmark case in corporate discrimination law. Her educational background in institutional power dynamics helped her understand that this incident would have ramifications far beyond a single flight. Marcus's live stream had exploded to over 800 viewers as news of the incident spread through social media. Aviation industry insiders were flooding his chat with information about both Sterling Aviation Holdings and Apex Capital Ventures. Comments poured in from verified airline employees, aircraft manufacturers, and aviation executives. If this is really Whitney Sterling, Premier Airways is about to have the worst day in corporate history, one verified aviation journalist commented. Sterling Aviation owns or leases about 30% of Premier's fleet. Officer Jackson looked like he might actually faint. In 15 years of airport security, he'd never encountered a situation where law enforcement had been called to remove a passenger who turned out to be a partial owner of the airline. Harrison found his voice, though it cracked with panic. Dr. Sterling, even if your business relationships are as you've described, it doesn't change the need to follow standard passenger service protocols. Whitney cut him off with surgical precision. Mr. Harrison, let me be very clear about what actually happened here. Your employee made racial assumptions about my economic status, physically assaulted me in front of witnesses, accused me of document fraud without verification, and broadcast the attack to social media without consent. Her voice remained calm, but every word carried the weight of legal training and corporate authority. All of this occurred while I was legally occupying a seat on an aircraft that my company owns and leases to your airline for operational use. The cabin fell silent, except for the electronic hum of multiple recording devices capturing every word. Captain Thompson pulled out his phone and dialed with shaking fingers. This is Captain Thompson, employee ID 7743, calling from aircraft N892SA. I need immediate verification and emergency consultation regarding Sterling Aviation Holdings executive leadership. While he waited for the call to connect, Whitney continued her methodical dismantling of their position. According to Premier Airways Passenger Service Manual, Section 12, for which I've reviewed thoroughly given our extensive business relationship, crew members must verify passenger documentation through official channels before making accusations of fraud. Was this protocol followed? Harrison opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. The manual was clear and everyone in the cabin knew proper procedures hadn't been followed. Furthermore, Whitney continued, consulting her phone, Premier Airways employee social media policy, updated 6 months ago, specifically prohibits staff from live streaming passenger interactions without explicit consent. Ms. Martinez has been broadcasting this assault to hundreds of viewers in direct violation of both company policy and federal privacy laws. Renee's face went white as she realized her live stream was still running, now with 347 viewers watching her career disintegrate in real time. She fumbled with her phone, trying to figure out how to end the broadcast without making her panic obvious. Captain Thompson's verification call connected. Yes, this is Thompson with Premier Airways Flight PA3649. I need to verify the identity of Dr. Whitney Sterling and her business relationships with our parent company. Yes, I'll hold for confirmation. 2 minutes past scheduled takeoff. The voice on the other end was loud enough for passengers in the first 3 rows to hear clearly. Dr. Sterling is indeed the CEO of Sterling Aviation Holdings and managing partner of Apex Capital Ventures. She's currently traveling to Atlanta for our quarterly stakeholder meeting. Captain, is there some kind of problem with her flight? Thompson closed his eyes and took a deep breath. No problem, sir. Just routine verification procedures. He ended the call and looked at Whitney with a mixture of profound respect and barely controlled terror. Dr. Sterling, on behalf of Premier Airways, Consolidated Airways International, and our entire organization, I offer our most sincere apologies. This incident represents a complete failure of our systems and values. But Whitney Sterling, CEO, major shareholder, and assault victim, wasn't finished dismantling their assumptions. She opened another app on her phone, this one showing real-time business metrics and social media analytics. What she was about to reveal would demonstrate that the damage from this incident was already far beyond anything they could contain. The corporate nuclear weapon was about to detonate. What Whitney discovered on her phone would destroy everything they thought they could control about this situation. Whitney's business analytics app displayed devastating real-time data. Captain Thompson, this incident has now been viewed over 3,200 times across various social media platforms in the past 15 minutes. The hashtag Juck Premier Assault is trending in Atlanta, Miami, and New York. Sterling discrimination is climbing rapidly. She turned the screen so he could see the viral spread across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and specialized aviation forums. My company's public relations team has been monitoring the situation and documenting everything for potential legal and business proceedings. The business impact was already measurable and accelerating. Our stock monitoring shows Sterling Aviation Holdings trading up 1% as investors anticipate potential contract renegotiations. Consolidated Airways International has dropped 4% in the past 12 minutes as word spreads through financial networks. David Martinez continued recording, his military background helping him understand the strategic implications. Folks watching this, we're witnessing what might be the most expensive discrimination incident in aviation history. This is absolutely unprecedented. Principal Sarah Thompson had filled 6 pages of notes, her educational training in crisis documentation proving invaluable. She'd witnessed discrimination cases in schools, but nothing approaching this level of institutional power collision. Marcus's live stream had reached 1,247 viewers, with aviation industry professionals flooding his comments. His communication studies had prepared him for managing large online audiences, but the rapid growth was overwhelming his ability to moderate. Whitney's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Legal Emergency Board Chair. She answered immediately, putting it on speaker so everyone could hear. Dr. Sterling, this is Board Chair Hamilton. We're monitoring the situation through social media feeds. Are you safe? Do you need immediate legal intervention? I'm physically unharmed beyond the assault, Mr. Hamilton. The entire incident has been documented by multiple witnesses. I'll need a comprehensive analysis of our contractual exposure with Premier Airways by end of business today. Understood. Legal is already preparing contract termination options and calculating potential damages. Should we begin proceedings? Captain Thompson's face went even paler. Contract termination by Sterling Aviation could ground 30% of Premier's fleet within 90 days. Whitney considered the question with the same calm deliberation she'd shown throughout the crisis. Not yet, Mr. Hamilton. I want to see how Premier Airways chooses to handle this situation before we take irreversible action. She ended the call and looked directly at Captain Thompson. Captain, Sterling Aviation Holdings currently maintains active contracts worth $847 million annually with Premier Airways and its subsidiaries. We lease 67 aircraft to your fleet of 196 total planes, representing 2% of your operational capacity. The numbers hit Thompson like physical blows. He'd never heard passenger statistics delivered with such devastating precision. Additionally, we provide maintenance contracts for another 23 aircraft in your fleet, and we're currently negotiating a $1.2 billion expansion deal for next fiscal year that would increase your capacity by 40%. Harrison looked like he might actually collapse. The potential business impact was beyond anything he'd encountered in 2 decades of airline management. Officer Jackson stood frozen, his security training providing no framework for a situation where the victim of an assault controlled the operational future of a major airline. Dr. Sterling, Captain Thompson managed, please tell me how we can appropriately resolve this situation and maintain our critical business relationship. But before Whitney could respond, her phone displayed an incoming call that would add yet another layer of complexity to the crisis. The caller ID read, Federal Aviation Administration, Executive Office. Captain Thompson, it appears federal regulators are now aware of this incident. Whitney held up the phone so everyone could see the FAA caller ID. Discrimination incidents involving physical assault on aircraft trigger mandatory federal investigation protocols. She answered the call, again putting it on speaker. Dr. Sterling speaking. Dr. Sterling, this is Deputy Administrator Patricia Morrison with the FAA. We've become aware of a serious incident involving assault and discrimination on your flight. Are you currently safe? Yes, Deputy Administrator Morrison. I'm currently speaking with Premier Airways senior management about resolution procedures. Dr. Sterling, given your position in the industry and the severity of the allegations, we're initiating an emergency investigation under Title 49 USC Section 44902. This incident may trigger broader compliance reviews of Premier Airways operational certification. Captain Thompson's hands were shaking as he realized federal investigators would now scrutinize every aspect of Premier's operations. Airlines could lose their operating certificates for systematic discrimination issues. We'll need detailed documentation of the incident and your company's response, Captain Thompson, Morrison continued. Dr. Sterling, our investigators will contact you within the hour. The call ended, leaving the cabin in stunned silence. Whitney opened one final app on her phone, a secure messaging system showing communications with other major aviation industry executives. Captain Thompson, while we've been talking, I've received messages from CEOs of 3 other major airlines expressing concern about this incident. Word spreads quickly in our industry. As she showed him the messages, Whitney saw the feeds. How can we support you? From Delta's CEO. Sterling team has our full backing from United's president. This is unacceptable. Industry needs to act. From American's chief executive. 5 minutes past scheduled takeoff. Captain, what you're seeing is not just a passenger service recovery situation. This has become an industry-wide moment that will determine whether systematic discrimination in aviation continues or finally faces real consequences. Whitney's transformation from victim to industry leader, orchestrating institutional change, was now complete. The most powerful revelation was yet to come. Captain Thompson realized they'd moved far beyond crisis management into potential corporate extinction. He pulled out his emergency phone and dialed directly to Consolidated Airways' CEO emergency line. This is Captain Thompson on flight PA3649. I need immediate patch through to CEO Williams. This is code red, potential company-ending crisis. The connection took less than 30 seconds. CEO Michael Williams, a 25-year veteran of aviation management, came on the line with controlled tension. Thompson, what's the situation? Sir, we have a passenger assault and discrimination incident involving Dr. Whitney Sterling of Sterling Aviation Holdings. She's been physically attacked by our crew, and the entire incident has been live-streamed across multiple platforms. The silence on the other end lasted a full 10 seconds. Did you say Whitney Sterling? The Whitney Sterling who inherited Sterling Aviation 3 months ago? Yes, sir. She's also revealed herself as managing partner of Apex Capital Ventures, which apparently holds a 12.7% stake in our parent company. The FAA is initiating emergency investigations, and this has gone viral across aviation industry networks. Williams' response was immediate and sharp. Jesus Christ. Patch me through to her immediately. Whitney accepted the speakerphone connection, with the same composed authority she'd maintained throughout the crisis. Dr. Sterling, this is Michael Williams, CEO of Consolidated Airways International. I'm calling to personally apologize for what appears to be an absolutely inexcusable situation. This represents a complete failure of our corporate values and training systems. Mr. Williams, I appreciate your intervention. However, we need to discuss immediate corrective actions and long-term systematic changes to prevent similar incidents. Whitney opened her notes app and began reading with corporate precision. I'm proposing 5 immediate actions. First, termination of the employee who initiated the physical assault and discrimination. Second, suspension and mandatory retraining for all management who escalated without following verification protocols. Third, a public corporate apology acknowledging the discriminatory and criminal nature of this incident. Fourth, immediate implementation of real-time bias reporting systems. Fifth, quarterly diversity metrics reported directly to Sterling Aviation as part of our ongoing contract relationship. Williams' response was immediate. All 5 actions will be implemented within 4 hours. Dr. Sterling, what else do we need to do to maintain your confidence in our partnership? But Whitney wasn't finished. The young CEO who had inherited a $3.2 billion company was about to demonstrate why her grandfather had chosen her as his successor. Mr. Williams, this incident has cost your company approximately $47 million in lost market value in the past 20 minutes. Your stock price is down 4% and falling. 3 financial news outlets are already running headlines about discrimination in aviation. She showed Captain Thompson her phone displaying real-time financial news. Aviation Weekly, Bloomberg Transportation and Reuters were all covering the story with headlines like Sterling Aviation CEO assaulted on partner airline and Premier Airways faces federal investigation after discrimination incident. Furthermore, Whitney continued, I've received calls from board members of 4 other major airlines questioning whether Premier Airways represents the industry standards they want to maintain. Your reputation damage extends far beyond stock prices. David Martinez's recording had captured every word of the corporate negotiations. His military experience with high-stakes situations helped him understand they were witnessing a complete power restructuring in real time. Principal Sarah Thompson was documenting not just the discrimination incident, but watching a masterclass in corporate crisis management and institutional accountability. Marcus's livestream had reached 1,147 viewers, with major aviation industry figures joining the conversation. His communications training helped him recognize this as a pivotal moment that would be studied in business schools. CEO Williams' voice carried genuine concern and strategic calculation. Dr. Sterling, beyond the immediate corrective actions, what would constitute appropriate institutional change to prevent similar incidents system-wide? Whitney's response revealed the full scope of her vision for industry transformation. Mr. Williams, I want Premier Airways to become the industry standard for inclusive aviation experiences. I want comprehensive unconscious bias training for all customer-facing employees. I want real-time incident reporting systems with executive oversight. I want passenger advocacy protocols that protect travelers who don't have my resources to fight back. Her voice carried quiet power that filled the cabin. Most importantly, I want this incident to become the catalyst for industry-wide change that protects every passenger from the discrimination I've experienced today. Williams was quiet for a moment, processing the scope of the proposed changes. Dr. Sterling, we commit to implementing every change you've outlined. Our legal and HR teams will draft a comprehensive discrimination prevention plan within 24 hours. Mr. Williams, if these changes are substantial and measurable, Sterling Aviation will not only continue our partnership, but potentially expand it. However, if similar incidents occur anywhere in your system, or if these commitments aren't implemented with full corporate support, Apex Capital Ventures will exercise our shareholder rights to demand executive accountability, including board restructuring. The carrot and stick approach was masterful, offering both consequences and rewards based on corporate response. Dr. Sterling, you have my personal guarantee and the full weight of corporate commitment that this will never happen again in our system. 7 minutes past scheduled takeoff. Now Whitney was ready to address the cabin full of witnesses who had documented her transformation from assault victim to industry change agent. She was about to turn this moment of personal vindication into a teachable moment that would resonate far beyond a single aircraft. This story of courage inspiring people all around the world. Let us know what country and city you're watching from, so we can see how far these powerful messages of dignity and justice are reaching. Whitney stood and addressed the entire cabin, her voice carrying newfound authority mixed with genuine gratitude. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for witnessing this incident and for your support. David, Sarah, Marcus, your documentation and advocacy transformed what could have been a private assault into an opportunity for systematic change. She gestured toward the 3 passengers who had recorded the incident. But I want everyone to understand that this wasn't just about me or my companies. This was about every person who has faced discrimination while traveling, who didn't have the resources to fight back, who accepted unfair treatment because they felt powerless. The military veteran, David Martinez, stood and addressed the cabin. Dr. Sterling, as a veteran who has served this country, I want you to know that what happened to you was wrong on every level. Your response has shown incredible strength and dignity. Principal Sarah Thompson also rose. In my 20 years in education, I've seen discrimination take many forms. What's remarkable about this incident is how you've transformed personal injustice into institutional learning. This will protect countless future passengers. Marcus, the Morehouse student, held up his phone showing his livestream metrics. Dr. Sterling, my stream has reached over 2,000 people, and the response has been overwhelmingly supportive. Your story is inspiring people across the country to demand better from the institutions they interact with. But not everyone in the cabin had been supportive throughout the incident. The elderly passenger in seat 3C, who had initially remained silent during the discrimination, finally spoke up. "Dr. Sterling, I owe you an apology. When I first saw what was happening, I made assumptions based on my own prejudices. I should have spoken up immediately when you were assaulted. I'm ashamed of my silence." Whitney's response demonstrated the grace and wisdom that had made her grandfather's choice of successor so prescient. "Mrs. Henderson, recognizing our biases and committing to do better is exactly how real change happens. Your willingness to acknowledge and learn is more valuable than any apology." Officer Jackson, who had remained professional throughout the ordeal, approached Whitney with genuine respect. "Dr. Sterling, I apologize for my role in this situation. I should have recognized the assault immediately and taken stronger action to protect you. Your composure under these circumstances has been remarkable." "Officer Jackson, you followed your training as you understood it. The system failed all of us today by not having proper protocols for these situations. That's exactly what we're going to fix through these systematic changes." Her response transformed a moment of personal apology into institutional learning, demonstrating the leadership qualities that had made her grandfather's succession choice so strategic. Captain Thompson stepped forward to address the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Premier Airways, I want to personally apologize for the incident you've all witnessed. What happened to Dr. Sterling was completely unacceptable and represents a failure of our training, our protocols, and our values as an organization." He paused, looking directly at Whitney. "Dr. Sterling has shown remarkable grace and wisdom in her response. Her demands for systematic change will help ensure that no other passenger experiences this kind of treatment." Senior Manager Harrison, who had been quietly processing the magnitude of the corporate crisis, made an announcement. Effective immediately, Premier Airways is implementing emergency passenger advocacy protocols. Any discrimination complaint will require supervisor review and documentation before any action is taken. Whitney's phone chimed with a secure message from her legal team. She glanced at it briefly, then addressed the cabin again. "I've just received confirmation that Sterling Aviation Holdings' legal team has completed their preliminary analysis of this incident. They've identified 17 separate violations of federal anti-discrimination laws, privacy regulations, and corporate policies. The weight of potential legal action settled over the cabin like a heavy blanket. However," Whitney continued, "I'm more interested in prevention than punishment. The changes Premier Airways has committed to implementing will serve as a model for the entire aviation industry." Renee Martinez, who had been silent since her live stream ended, finally spoke up with desperation creeping into her voice. "Dr. Sterling, I made a mistake. I was having a difficult day, and I let my emotions get the better of me. Please don't let this destroy my career." Whitney looked at Renee with the same composed expression she'd maintained throughout the crisis. "Ms. Martinez, you didn't make a mistake. You made a series of deliberate choices based on racial assumptions. You chose to assault me physically. You chose to broadcast it without consent. You chose to escalate rather than verify." Her voice remained calm but carried unmistakable authority. Those weren't emotional reactions. They were expressions of bias that put every passenger of color at risk when they fly. CEO Williams' voice came through the speakerphone one final time. "Dr. Sterling, Ms. Martinez's employment is terminated effective immediately. We're also implementing mandatory quarterly bias training for all customer-facing employees, with annual recertification requirements." The finality of the corporate response hit everyone in the cabin. This wasn't just about one incident, it was about institutional accountability at the highest levels. Whitney opened her social media monitoring app again. The response to this incident has been remarkable. Sterling discrimination is now trending nationally, with over 12,000 uses in the past hour. Aviation industry professionals are using this as a catalyst for broader conversations about discrimination in travel. Marcus held up his phone, showing his live stream had reached 2,847 viewers. "Dr. Sterling, people are sharing stories of their own discrimination experiences in my chat. Your response is inspiring others to speak up about injustices they've faced." David Martinez reviewed his recording. I'm going to make sure this video reaches every civil rights organization and aviation safety group in the country. What happened here needs to be seen and studied. Principal Sarah Thompson had filled an entire notebook with documentation. This incident will become part of my diversity training curriculum. The way you've handled this situation demonstrates how preparation, composure, and strategic thinking can transform systemic problems. 9 minutes past scheduled takeoff. Whitney's phone showed another incoming call, this time from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. The civil rights community has taken notice of this incident, she announced to the cabin. They're offering support for both legal action and policy advocacy. But Whitney had one more revelation that would demonstrate the full scope of her commitment to change. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to announce that Sterling Aviation Holdings will be establishing the Dignity in Transit Foundation, providing legal aid and advocacy for travelers facing discrimination. Every passenger should have the resources to fight back against injustice. The transformation was complete. Whitney Sterling had evolved from assault victim to industry reformer to advocate for travelers everywhere who lacked her resources and platform. Captain Thompson looked at his watch. Dr. Sterling, are we cleared for departure? I know you mentioned important meetings in Atlanta. Whitney smiled genuinely for the first time since boarding. Captain Thompson, I believe we're ready. But first, I think our fellow passengers deserve to understand what these changes will mean for their future travel experiences. She was about to turn this moment of personal vindication into a lasting promise for institutional reform that would protect countless future travelers. Whitney stood once more to address the cabin, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had just orchestrated industry-wide change through quiet strength and strategic patience. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed today isn't just conflict resolution. It's how institutions can evolve when they're held accountable by engaged stakeholders and supported by witnesses willing to document injustice. She gestured toward David, Sarah, and Marcus. Your willingness to record, advocate, and broadcast this incident transformed a private assault into a public moment of accountability. This is how real change happens, when individual courage meets institutional power. Captain Thompson stepped forward. Dr. Sterling is correct. The protocols we're implementing today, real-time incident reporting, mandatory bias training, executive oversight of discrimination complaints, these will become industry standards. He addressed the cabin directly. Every one of you will benefit from these changes. The passenger advocacy hotline will be available 24/7. The incident reporting app will provide direct access to executive leadership. No passenger will face what Dr. Sterling experienced today without immediate recourse and support. Whitney's phone chimed with a message from the FAA. She read it quickly, then shared the update with everyone. Deputy Administrator Morrison has just informed me that the Federal Aviation Administration will be using this incident as the foundation for new industry-wide anti-discrimination guidelines. These protocols will be mandatory for all commercial airlines within 6 months. The ripple effect was expanding beyond Premier Airways to encompass the entire aviation industry. David Martinez spoke up from his seat. Dr. Sterling, as someone who served in the military to protect the rights and dignity of all Americans, I want you to know that your response today has been inspiring. You've shown how to fight injustice with intelligence and strategy rather than just anger. Principal Sarah Thompson nodded in agreement. In education, we talk about teachable moments. This entire incident will become a case study in how to respond to discrimination with dignity and effectiveness. Your approach will help train future leaders. Marcus, still managing his live stream, provided real-time updates. The response has been incredible. Major civil rights organizations are sharing this story. Aviation industry executives are committing to review their own policies. This is becoming a movement. But Whitney wanted to ensure the focus remained on systemic change rather than individual recognition. I want everyone to understand that what happened today could have had a very different outcome if I hadn't had the resources, education, and corporate power to fight back. Millions of travelers face discrimination without any recourse. Her voice carried passionate conviction. The Dignity in Transit Foundation will provide legal representation, advocacy training and policy support for passengers who experience discrimination but lack the platform to demand justice. No one should have to accept unfair treatment because they feel powerless. Officer Jackson, who had observed the entire transformation, made his own commitment. Dr. Sterling, I'm requesting transfer to Premier Airways' new Passenger Advocacy Security Division. I want to be part of the solution rather than part of a system that failed you today. CEO Williams' voice came through the speakerphone with a final announcement. Dr. Sterling, Premier Airways is committing $2.5 million annually to fund diversity and inclusion initiatives industry-wide. We're also establishing the Sterling Partnership Program to work directly with your foundation on passenger advocacy training. Whitney's response demonstrated both gratitude and continued accountability. Mr. Williams, those commitments are meaningful, but their success will be measured by outcomes, not intentions. We'll be monitoring incident reports, passenger feedback, and discrimination complaints quarterly. 11 minutes past scheduled takeoff, the elderly passenger who had initially remained silent during the discrimination incident approached Whitney's seat. Dr. Sterling, I want you to know that watching your response has challenged me to examine my own biases. I'm 67 years old, but it's never too late to learn and grow. Whitney's response to the elderly woman embodied the grace and wisdom that would make this incident legendary. Mrs. Henderson, recognition and commitment to change are the most valuable gifts anyone can offer. Your willingness to learn will influence everyone in your life to do better. Captain Thompson announced over the intercom, Ladies and gentlemen, due to the significance of today's events, and Dr. Sterling's commitment to using this incident for positive change, Premier Airways is waiving all fees for today's passengers and providing travel vouchers as our appreciation for your patience and witness. But the most important change was yet to be announced. Whitney's phone showed an incoming call from the White House Transportation Office. She held up the phone so everyone could see the caller ID. It appears this incident has reached the highest levels of government attention. Transportation policy at the federal level is about to address discrimination in aviation in ways that have never been attempted before. The local incident was becoming a national catalyst for civil rights advancement in transportation. Whitney answered the White House call on speaker, her composure unchanged, even as the stakes reached the highest levels of government. Dr. Sterling, this is Deputy Secretary Patricia Hayes from the Department of Transportation. The Secretary and White House staff have been monitoring the situation through social media and news reports. Are you currently safe and receiving appropriate support? Yes, Deputy Secretary Hayes. Premier Airways leadership has been cooperating fully with resolution efforts, and we're implementing comprehensive systematic changes to prevent similar incidents industry-wide. Dr. Sterling, given the national attention this incident has received and your position as a major aviation industry leader, the Secretary would like to invite you to participate in a federal task force on transportation discrimination. Your experience and perspective would be invaluable in developing national policy. The cabin fell silent as passengers realized they were witnessing the birth of federal civil rights policy in real time. Deputy Secretary, I would be honored to serve on such a task force. However, I want to ensure that any federal initiative includes voices from passengers who lack my resources and platform. Systemic change requires perspectives from all affected communities. David Martinez's recording captured every word of the federal conversation. His military background helped him understand they were witnessing a historic moment where individual courage was catalyzing national policy change. Principal Sarah Thompson recognized the educational significance of what was unfolding. Students will study this incident in civics classes for generations, she whispered to her seatmate. This is how government responds when citizens demand accountability. Marcus's livestream had reached over 4,000 viewers, with major news outlets beginning to pick up the story. His communications training told him this was becoming one of the most significant civil rights moments in modern aviation history. Dr. Sterling, Deputy Secretary Hayes continued, the President has asked me to convey his personal appreciation for your dignified response to this incident. Your approach demonstrates how leadership can transform injustice into institutional progress. Whitney's response reflected both humility and continued focus on systemic change. Deputy Secretary, please convey to the President that real change happens when institutions commit to ongoing accountability, not just crisis response. The work begins after the cameras stop recording. CEO Williams interjected from the speakerphone. Deputy Secretary Hayes, Premier Airways commits to full cooperation with any federal investigation or policy development. We view this incident as an opportunity to lead industry-wide transformation. Captain Thompson addressed the cabin once more. Ladies and gentlemen, you're witnessing history. The policies being developed from this incident will protect travelers for generations to come. Whitney's phone displayed another incoming call, this time from CNN's transportation correspondent. The media attention is expanding rapidly, she announced. Major news networks are requesting interviews about this incident and its implications for civil rights in transportation. But Whitney's focus remained on concrete outcomes rather than publicity. I'll engage with media only to the extent that it advances policy change and passenger protection. This isn't about personal recognition, it's about institutional transformation. Officer Jackson spoke up with genuine admiration. Dr. Sterling, in 15 years of security work, I've never seen anyone handle a crisis with such strategic thinking and grace under pressure. You've taught everyone in this cabin about real leadership. The elderly passenger, Mrs. Henderson, had tears in her eyes as she addressed Whitney. Dear, you've shown me that standing up for what's right isn't just about the moment. It's about creating a better world for everyone who comes after us. Renee Martinez, whose career had ended as a result of her discrimination and assault, listened silently to the federal policy discussions. The magnitude of what her actions had triggered was becoming clear. 13 minutes past scheduled takeoff. Whitney's secure messaging app showed communications from aviation CEOs across the industry. I'm receiving commitments from 12 major airlines to implement Premier Airways' new protocols voluntarily, before any federal mandate. The industry is self-regulating in response to this incident. She showed Captain Thompson the messages. Sterling team, Delta adopts your protocols immediately. Delta CEO. United implementing bias training system-wide within 30 days. United President. American Airlines requests partnership on passenger advocacy program. American Chief Executive. Captain Thompson, what began as discrimination on one aircraft is becoming transformation across the entire aviation industry. This is how institutional change happens, through strategic pressure and collaborative solutions. Deputy Secretary Hayes made one final announcement. Dr. Sterling, the federal task force will convene within 2 weeks. We'll be developing the most comprehensive transportation anti-discrimination policies in American history. The transformation from assault victim to federal policy advisor was complete. But Whitney had one more surprise that would cement her legacy as a transformational leader in American civil rights. As the aircraft finally began its taxi toward the runway, Whitney made one final announcement that would establish her lasting legacy in civil rights advancement. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to share one more commitment that Sterling Aviation Holdings is making in response to this incident. She opened a financial app on her phone showing corporate allocations. We're establishing a $50 million endowment for the Dignity in Transit Foundation. This funding will provide legal representation, advocacy training, and policy support for any traveler who experiences discrimination in transportation. The scope of the commitment stunned everyone in the cabin. $50 million represented one of the largest private civil rights investments in transportation history. Furthermore, Whitney continued, we're partnering with historically black colleges and universities to create the Aviation Civil Rights Institute. Students will research discrimination patterns, develop policy solutions, and provide advocacy services for affected travelers. David Martinez's military training helped him recognize the strategic brilliance of Whitney's approach. Dr. Sterling, you've created a permanent institutional response to ensure this kind of discrimination can't happen to future passengers. This is nation-building level thinking. Principal Sarah Thompson was taking notes furiously. recognizing the educational implications. The Aviation Civil Rights Institute will train future generations of advocates. This incident will protect travelers for decades to come through education and policy development. Marcus's livestream audience had grown to over 5,200 viewers as major news outlets began covering the story. Dr. Sterling, people in my chat are sharing this story internationally. You're inspiring discrimination victims worldwide to demand institutional accountability. CEO Williams' voice carried genuine awe as he processed the magnitude of Whitney's response. Dr. Sterling, your commitment to transforming this incident into lasting change demonstrates leadership that extends far beyond business. You're creating a civil rights legacy. Captain Thompson made an announcement over the aircraft intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're finally ready for takeoff. This flight will be remembered as the moment when aviation discrimination faced its most significant challenge and transformation in industry history. As the aircraft lifted off, 18 minutes behind schedule, Whitney reflected on the journey from assault victim to civil rights leader that had occurred in less than an hour. I want everyone to understand that what happened today wasn't about revenge or even justice in the traditional sense. It was about using privilege and power responsibly to create systems that protect people who lack both. Officer Jackson, who would soon transfer to Premier Airways' Passenger Advocacy Division, made his own commitment. Dr. Sterling, I'm dedicating the rest of my career to ensuring no passenger ever experiences what you went through today. Your response has shown me how to turn a career in security into a mission for civil rights. The elderly passenger, Mrs. Henderson, approached Whitney's seat one final time. My dear, I'm 67 years old and I've never seen anything like what you accomplished today. You've inspired me to examine my own biases and commit to being part of the solution rather than part of the problem. Whitney's response embodied the wisdom and grace that had made this transformation possible. Mrs. Henderson, recognition and commitment to change are the most powerful forces for social progress. Your willingness to grow will influence everyone in your life. As the aircraft reached cruising altitude, Whitney's phone showed the final metrics from the incident. Sterling discrimination had been used over 25,000 times. Videos of the incident had been viewed over 100,000 times across all platforms. Major news outlets in 12 countries were covering the story. But the most meaningful measurement was the institutional change already underway. 12 airlines have committed to implementing Premier Airways' new protocols. The FAA is fast-tracking industry-wide anti-discrimination guidelines. The White House is convening a federal task force. And the Dignity in Transit Foundation will begin operations next month. David Martinez summed up the transformation perfectly. Dr. Sterling, you took the worst kind of injustice, physical assault based on racial discrimination, and turned it into the most comprehensive civil rights advancement in transportation history. That's not just leadership, that's transformational thinking. As Atlanta's skyline came into view, Whitney prepared for her board meeting. The same meeting that had brought her to this flight where she would face discrimination that became the catalyst for industry-wide change. The board meeting I'm attending will now focus on how Sterling Aviation Holdings can support the civil rights initiatives we've launched today. Sometimes the most important business happens when you least expect it. Principal Sarah Thompson made one final observation. This incident will be studied in schools, universities, and corporate training programs for generations. You've created a textbook example of how to respond to injustice with strategic thinking and transformational leadership. The aircraft began its descent into Atlanta, carrying passengers who had witnessed the birth of a civil rights movement that would protect travelers for generations to come. As Premier Airways flight PA3649 approached Atlanta's airport, the cabin buzzed with quiet conversations about the historic incident they had witnessed. Whitney Sterling had transformed a moment of personal assault into a catalyst for industry-wide change. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Thompson announced over the intercom, we're beginning our descent into Atlanta. Due to the significance of today's events, Premier Airways has arranged for expedited deplaning for all passengers, with priority assistance for Dr. Sterling. Whitney declined the special treatment with characteristic grace. Captain Thompson, I appreciate the gesture, but I'll deplane with everyone else. This incident was about equal treatment, not special privileges. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from board members, media outlets and civil rights organizations. The Sterling Aviation Holdings board meeting would now focus on implementing the civil rights initiatives born from this discrimination incident. David Martinez gathered his recording equipment and approached Whitney's seat. "Doctor Sterling, I'm a veteran and I've seen courage under fire. What you did today, turning assault into advocacy, represents the highest form of service to your fellow citizens." He handed her a business card. "I work in corporate security, but after today I want to contribute to your foundation's work. Your response has inspired me to use my skills for civil rights rather than just corporate protection." Principal Sarah Thompson had filled 2 notebooks with documentation of the incident and its resolution. "Dr. Sterling, I teach conflict resolution and social justice. This incident will become the centerpiece of my curriculum. You've demonstrated how preparation, composure, and strategic thinking can transform systemic injustice." Marcus, the Morehouse student, showed Whitney his final live-stream metrics. "Dr. Sterling, over 6,800 people watched this incident unfold. The comments are overwhelmingly supportive, with people sharing their own discrimination stories and feeling inspired to speak up." His communications studies had prepared him to recognize historical significance. This is the kind of moment that changes culture. Social media has amplified your message globally. Officer Jackson, who would soon begin his new career in passenger advocacy, made a personal commitment. "Dr. Sterling, I want to thank you for showing me how to be part of the solution. Your dignity under assault has inspired me to dedicate my career to protecting other passengers from discrimination." CEO Williams' voice came through the cabin speaker one final time. "Dr. Sterling, Premier Airways will be hosting a press conference tomorrow to announce our new anti-discrimination protocols. We'd be honored if you would participate to ensure the message focuses on systematic change rather than crisis management." Whitney considered the invitation thoughtfully. "Mr. Williams, I'll participate if the focus remains on policy implementation and passenger protection. This isn't about corporate public relations, it's about institutional accountability." As the aircraft touched down in Atlanta, Whitney's phone rang with a call from the mayor's office. Atlanta's mayor wanted to present her with a key to the city in recognition of her civil rights leadership. "While I appreciate the recognition," Whitney told the mayor's representative, "I'd prefer any ceremony focus on the civil rights initiatives rather than individual honors. The Dignity in Transit Foundation launch would be a more appropriate venue for public recognition." Mrs. Henderson, the elderly passenger who had confronted her own biases during the incident, approached Whitney's seat as passengers prepared to deplane. "My dear, you've given me homework at age 67. I'm going to spend the rest of my years making sure I'm part of the solution to discrimination rather than part of the problem through silence." Whitney's response reflected the wisdom that had guided her throughout the crisis. "Mrs. Henderson, the most important work happens after the cameras stop recording. Your commitment to personal growth will influence everyone in your family and community." As passengers began deplaning, each person who had witnessed the incident stopped to thank Whitney for her response. The businessman who had initially remained silent, the flight attendants who had watched their colleagues' career end due to discrimination, and the security personnel who had learned about institutional bias. "Dr. Sterling," Captain Thompson said as she gathered her belongings, "in 30 years of aviation, I've never witnessed anything like what you accomplished today. You've changed our industry permanently." Whitney's final words to the cabin crew demonstrated her continued focus on systematic change rather than personal recognition. "Captain Thompson, the real measure of success will be whether passengers 6 months from now experience the kind of respectful, dignified service that every traveler deserves." She deplaned carrying the same Hermes bag, wearing the same elegant blazer, and maintaining the same composed dignity that had characterized her response throughout the assault and its aftermath. But now she carried something additional: the responsibility of leading a civil rights movement that would protect millions of future travelers from the discrimination she had experienced and transformed into institutional change. The quiet power she had demonstrated would ripple through the aviation industry and beyond for generations to come. 6 months later, the transformation was measurable and profound. Premier Airways reported a 78% reduction in passenger discrimination complaints across their entire network. The incident reporting app had processed over 400 cases, with 96% resolved within 24 hours through the new executive oversight system. Whitney's quarterly board meeting had led to Sterling Aviation Holdings expanding their partnership with Premier Airways by $420 million, the largest contract increase in the airline's history. Trust, it turned out, was not just morally right but profitable. The Dignity in Transit Foundation had handled 934 cases in its first 6 months, with a 93% success rate in achieving policy changes or compensation for discrimination victims. Federal funding had increased the foundation's budget to $75 million annually. David Martinez, the veteran who had recorded the incident, was now director of Sterling Aviation's new Civil Rights Documentation Division. His military precision in capturing evidence had become the gold standard for incident recording protocols industry-wide. "Doctor, Sterling showed me that being a witness means more than just recording," he said in a follow-up interview. "It means using your documentation to create systematic change that protects future victims." Principal Sarah Thompson had developed the Sterling Protocol, a conflict resolution framework now used in schools across 12 states. Her educational background had helped transform the aviation incident into pedagogical tools for teaching civil rights advocacy. Whitney Sterling demonstrated that individual preparation, institutional knowledge, and strategic patience can transform entire systems of injustice, Thompson wrote in her curriculum guide that was adopted by the National Education Association. Marcus Johnson, the Morehouse student whose live stream had amplified the incident globally, graduated with a communications degree and joined CNN as a civil rights correspondent. His first major documentary, Dignity at 30,000 Feet, won 3 journalism awards. Social media gave Dr. Sterling's response global reach, Marcus reflected. But it was her strategic thinking and principled leadership that created lasting change. The Federal Aviation Administration had implemented the Sterling Standards, mandatory anti-discrimination protocols for all commercial airlines. Deputy Secretary Hayes credited Whitney's incident with producing the most comprehensive transportation civil rights advancement since the 1960s. Dr. Sterling's response demonstrated how individual courage, combined with institutional power, can create systematic change that protects millions of people, Hayes said at the Federal Task Force's final press conference. Even Mrs. Henderson, the elderly passenger who had confronted her own biases, found purpose in advocacy. At 68, she joined Premier Airways' Passenger Advisory Board, helping develop policies from the traveler's perspective. "It's never too late to learn and grow," she said in a local news interview. Dr. Sterling could have destroyed those who wronged her, but she chose to fix the system instead. "That taught me more about grace and power than any sermon ever could." Officer Jackson had been promoted to head of the aviation industry's new Passenger Advocacy Security Alliance, a consortium of airlines working together to prevent discrimination. His first initiative partnered with civil rights organizations to train security personnel in de-escalation and bias recognition. "Dr. Sterling showed me that real security means protecting people's dignity, not just their physical safety," Jackson explained to his new trainees. What happened to Renee Martinez, the flight attendant whose assault had triggered the transformation? Initially, she struggled with unemployment and blamed cancel culture for her situation. Eventually, she enrolled in a diversity and inclusion certificate program. "I had to face what I had become," Martinez said in a later interview. "Dr. Sterling could have destroyed me completely, but she chose to fix the system that created people like I was. That taught me more than any punishment could have." The ripple effect extended far beyond aviation. The Sterling model, using institutional power strategically to create systematic change, was adopted by civil rights organizations across multiple industries. Hotels, restaurants, retail chains, and healthcare systems implemented similar protocols. Whitney Sterling established the Sterling Institute at Morehouse College, providing full scholarships for students studying civil rights law, policy development, and institutional change. The institute had produced 127 graduates working in civil rights organizations across the country. "This isn't just about one woman's triumph over discrimination," Whitney said at the institute's first graduation ceremony. "This is about how quiet power, sustained by preparation and guided by principle, can transform entire systems of injustice. The real power of these stories lies in their demonstration that change is possible when individuals refuse to accept less than they deserve while using their resources to protect others who lack similar advantages." Whitney Sterling didn't need to raise her voice to raise the standard. Her story joins countless other examples of how dignified resistance, strategic thinking, and principled leadership can create lasting institutional change. Your turn to make a difference. Have you witnessed discrimination in travel, work, or daily life? Share your story and your commitment to being part of the solution. When you see injustice, document it. When you have power, use it responsibly. When you face discrimination, remember that your response can echo far beyond the moment. The most powerful response is often the one they never see coming. The transformation of personal injustice into systematic change that protects countless others. Remember, you don't need to raise your voice to raise the standard, but you do need to raise your expectations and demand that institutions rise to meet them. Thank you to everyone who typed dignity, and to all who shared their locations from around the world. Your global support for justice and equality means everything. If these stories of courage and systematic change inspire you, please subscribe to join our community and help us share more incredible tales of dignity triumphing over discrimination. Until next time, keep believing in the power of strategic resistance and principled leadership to create the change our world desperately needs.